Hi there, everybody. Monday on Astral Oracles. I'm going to give some general framework about what goes on this channel where we work, of course, with Astral Oracles. That is messages coming from these higher layers of reality, these dimensions that we often call metaphysical, though they are quite physical. They're just not discernible with anything else than the very, very fine-tuned instruments that we have in our bodies, and also the energy bodies and those surrounding, let's say, more subtle esoteric bodies that surround us. But essentially, we are embedded within this giant mandala. You can also think of it as a yantra or something similar, but this great harmonic structure of order that permeates the universe. And so what is a human being within this great order? What they always show us, and what is very visible to me in the visions when I channel, is that we are more like a point of consciousness, what we sometimes known as the Merkaba. That actually means chariot in ancient Hebrew, and that is it's the vessel that carries divine intention and manifests it into the physical. Often we describe this as a prism. It is a type of focal lens that exists in the eternal dimensions, but creates the experience of finite reality, of material, temporal, spatial reality, the world as we know it, and this is essentially identical with the soul. This is what you can think of as the individual soul. This is also where free will resides. So you don't essentially have free will on the level of you, of a person or a body. What you do have free will regarding is where you put your attention. This is the thing that you regulate. And so what you are doing in this perspective is that you are essentially tuning the prism of that point of view, that infinite point of view, the soul, the Merkaba, this star body, which is physically, metaphysically situated here approximately in front of the chest. And you can think of it as these two intersecting triangles, the Star of David, also creating, of course, the perfect harmony of six, and thereby encasing the number 7, which then, of course, also corresponds to the sacred alignments of the 7, which is repeated in so many esoteric traditions. So this is, from a metaphysical point of view, this is actually how the entities see us. This is how the angels perceive us, and this is how we see ourselves if you, when we are dead, essentially, or if we move out into in ordinary states of consciousness where you can observe yourself from the outside. And you may have had these experiences, at least I had in particular, right before I began channeling, when meditation sessions, I would experience myself from above. So I'd see the situation, the physical outline, everything. I just see it as if I was hovering above myself, as people describe in near-death experiences. This is actually the point where you are experiencing yourself from a more eternal or stable point. And this is where free will resides. This is the thing that you are trying to connect to. And the more you connect to that, the more willed you become, so to speak, the more you are able to regulate your attention, vibration, intention to configure your reality into preferred reality, what we sometimes call manifestation. Manifestation is essentially this. It's attuning your vibration, intention, all these things, and then by that creating something into material reality, which of course is the high art of magic, right? Simply manipulating things with your mind, essentially. And what does this mean then? It has certain implications for, well, the way we think about ourselves, because what are you really? The you is essentially an illusion. the I is a grammatical construct. It's very, very helpful to have the idea that, oh, there's a person here with agency, and it wants things, and it acts out in the world. But if you think about it, what do you really want? Do you really know? I'll do the candy bar example, because it's always like, if somebody offers me a candy bar, I will be very inclined to say yes. But there's also definitely a layer of me that knows that that candy bar isn't good for me. And if I eat 3 of them, I'll feel very queasy. So the question is, do I want that candy bar? Or is it a part of me, a vibrational level that's oriented towards, let's say, immediate gratification, where sugar is it's a great thing for that, right? Like feel good while it lasts. That's definitely something it has in itself as a quality. So the question is then, what part of yourself are you aligning with? What is your intention here? What are you actually seeking to become, unfold, and manifest in this reality? Because you may think that, oh, well, what I want is, I don't know, a big house and be famous, and a harem on call, and a big car, and money in the bank, and whatever. But, well, we all know these almost platitudes about like that won't make you happy, because that's essentially true. That's very, very time-tested wisdom. That is true. And if you observe what people who have a lot of money usually get into at some point, it's often some type of philanthropy, because indeed that's way more gratifying. That's the thing you can actually do with those resources or that money that you couldn't do before, that will bring you some sort of fulfillment and gratification. And notice that you can then also interpret this on a lot of levels, because there is a basic level where, on the egoic level, the level of the I, where we can say, of course, this person is doing that because they want to be commemorated or admired or seen as a good person or something. Then there's a higher level, we can say a level of being a social being, where, well, this person is doing this because they want to contribute something to their fellow human beings in the society that they share with the resources they've amassed by being a part of that society. Then there's a part where we can say there's almost a type of redemption in it, where, well, this person is trying to be the best version of themselves they can, probably also because they've had experiences where they've been disappointed in the way they acted, and they've learned from experience that, oh, I wish I would have been a better person in that situation. And then there's a level of, let's call it almost historical necessity, or blind force, where this is just something that happens through this person. There isn't really any sense of personal agency. It's a lot of factors that are amassing themselves around someone to prod them into behaving in that particular way that they will behave in any given situation. And usually you can actually take any given person, and then, by knowing their level of income or education, or where they were brought up, or what position they had in their family, and you can sort of predict what opinions this person would have. It's fairly easy to do so, because we are fairly determined by all these factors around us. And what intercedes in this process is consciousness. And consciousness is essentially connecting this layer of material reality to higher, more subtle layers of volition, that level of the soul that wants to express itself through the world. And consciousness is always circumferential. It delineates things, but its very essence is that it is always invisible. Its outer boundaries are always exactly out of reach. And thereby it is exactly has the same qualities as light, which we also liken it to, because light only makes itself visible by reflecting itself on all the surfaces, but it can't be discerned in and of itself. So it's a process where we can say the circumference of the universe, the great absolute quality that holds everything together in reality, reflects itself and becomes visible by interacting with the material. And there we come literally to the metaphor enlightenment, because that is what we're growing as material beings, as conscious material beings, and that goes for us, and it goes for all of our galactic bodies, and every sentient being is fulfilling this purpose of connecting the material to the immaterial. The reason I say this is also because I'd like to clear up some what I feel are sometimes misconceptions that get into, let's say, modern channeling, metaphysics, spirituality, which are these law of attraction, self-gratifying ways where we take this metaphysical knowledge and then we do the Abraham Hicks thing, where it's like, how can I use this to get a Mercedes-Benz, right? And oh Lord, yes, won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz, because that would be so awesome. I actually have quite a lot of love for Abraham Hicks. Like it's meant significant things to me on different stages of my journey. But I also feel, that's my general take on it, that open eye channelers usually mingle a lot of their personal energy into the energy that they're bringing through. And that I definitely feel it is very, very evident with Esther Hicks. So it often becomes these illustrations of how awesome Abraham has made her life and how much she's enjoying spending all the cash that's flowing to her. And again, to return to that example of philanthropy, I don't know anybody, and I don't know any spiritual wisdom who will kind of hold that you will be happy by buying yourself a new wardrobe every day, or buying a new vacation home every day, because there is simply a limit to how you can use these things to actually grow the fulfillment and the expansion of you. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with material attainment or accumulating riches and using those for purposes that are meaningful. But the essence again becomes, who are you and what do you actually want? Because as soon as you have the Mercedes-Benz or something, that too will also be, well, a stepping stone to perhaps a sense of despondency, or feeling like, oh, okay, now what comes next? And this is an interesting point, I feel, because if we simply have that idea that spirituality is about becoming happier, brighter, more prosperous, more successful, we also misconstrue what it seems to be going on in, let's say, the highest spiritual expressions of our kind. So notice how all the very, very bright members of our species have had a tendency to attract a lot of darkness around them. And we can of course go with the Jesus or something like that, which is, well, why didn't he just take Satan up on his offer in the desert, right? Or why didn't Buddha just, what a goddamn loser, why didn't he just manifest being a prince and living a lovely life back in the compound? Well, again, it's because the highest light is essentially meant to grow the circumference of consciousness, and thereby it of course bumps up against that very thing which is its opposite, which is the darkness. And this repeats itself in many different layers. Like, let's take Joan of Arc, or let's take those like brilliant physicists who were about 100 years ago, were reinventing our image of what the physical world is. and they somehow end up in the New Mexico desert, creating a device that could possibly potentially kill us all. And that's a crazy, crazy reality somehow, that often you will find that the more you move into heightening your vibration, growing your consciousness, growing the circumference of who you are, growing your awareness, memory, and connection to those eternal parts of yourself, the more you will be confronted with all those things that have already exist in your life or in your world that are opposed to that fact. And that's why the spiritual journey is an arduous one. The ladder to heaven is a very slippery one. And you'll find in these ancient manuscripts, I believe, John Climacus and things about these ways of ascent to the ladder of heaven. The monks, they slip off, right? And then they fall in between the devils. There are all these ideas of how fragile a process it actually is, because it's always being prodded and pushed back onto itself. The reason I share this is partially to explain some of these things and gain some perspective and understanding about it myself, but also partially because I feel it might help some of you. And I know, being in contact with people through on their path in this line of work, that many people are dealing with coming from fairly dark circumstances one way or another. For instance, they may have a very, very dark family of origin. I have, for instance. And why is that? Why is it that it's actually helpful to come into an environment of overriding violence, to be confronted with who you are? Well, how would you know what you could potentially be? How would you be able to release yourself from these things if you didn't know the opposite? So simply, it's also the idea of let's say, the plant that strives for the light, that begins in the dark. It has to begin in very dark densities, because that's essentially what keeps the pressure on, that turns earth to jewels. I know I'm mixing up the metaphors, as I like doing, but hopefully you can see that if you are on your path somehow, you are feeling that you are progressing, that great changes are taking place, then don't feel flustered by the fact that you run up against very dark or challenging experiences. Rather, take stock of the fact that you are able to hold more of this. In Greek mythology, and if you study the tragedies in particular, there's a concept called ate, which is the fog of the gods. It's the kind of blindness that you are struck with in order for your fate to be fulfilled. And you will notice that this is something that also takes place for us on the pragmatic level, that there are simply things that consciousness shuts down dealing with, because it realizes that, oh, the light, the vibration that is present in this place would not be able to hold that. That's why we say that you never get more than you can handle. Because you will notice, for instance, then if you begin to work with yourself and progress and move forward, what will often happen, or what has happened to me recently, for instance, is that you will begin to remember completely horrendous things that you blocked out just because, like, your mind couldn't cope with the fact that that was the reality. And that can be, of course, heartbreaking. It's kind of unpleasant to say, I thought I was doing so well, and no, now I'm all of a sudden remembering all the physical abuse that I blocked out. Like that's not a very pleasant experience, of course, and it causes a lot of grief and anger and all kinds of unpleasant feelings. but it's also that thing which exactly allows you to grow your circumference, grow your ability to hold this, and thereby you're not only holding it for yourself, you're not only giving it a type of place where it's seen and acknowledged and recognized, but also it no longer has its momentum. It no longer affects you. But what you're essentially doing is that you're growing the circumference of consciousness, and thereby you're growing the general circumference of love. If we are to define love as a feeling, it is simply spaciousness. It's connected to this great feeling of allowance, and essentially the highest love that is the sublime metaphysical reality is that which is the canvas that allows for all of reality to play itself out upon it. It's a very beautiful thing, of course, that we're doing in that way. And I hope that can be helpful if you are either kind of feeling like, oh, maybe all my pursuits of attainment, they aren't really fulfilling me in the way I'd like, or maybe all this darkness I'm feeling with is actually not kind of what I wanted to be dealing with getting in to the spiritual path. So it's again the question that notice that these very different levels of agency that you have in your body mind complex, different things, they can partially be, let's say, very situational, very blind and short-sighted, but the highest sense of agency you have within yourself is a divine one. It's one which wishes to fulfill, resolve, expand, allow. And this is a process that then takes place often through challenge, through dark manifestation. I've been kind of speculating for a while about, did I want to make this video, how to make this video, should I share this? But it of course also arises from earlier this year I had a very, very painful short-lived relationship experience, and if I look at that in let's say the psychological perspective, I'm very aware that it's just dysfunctional situations, and relationships feel incredibly familiar and safe to me because that's what I was brought up in. But if I look at it at a spiritual perspective, I begin to realize that I think during the past 20 years or so have had about 5 of these relationships that really broke me. And somehow all of those relationships came into my life at very, very significant points, and they came into my life at a point of very clear manifestation. I was clearly beaming out the intention to the universe that I'd like to invite something in to stir me awake, to bring me into a different situation. And there's always an opportunity. It's well, seek and seek and ye shall find, right? So these things will move into your life when it is necessary. And that's, of course, also to say that then if you go on a psychological level, there are all these interpersonal dynamics where you can go, oh, okay, I think you could have treated me better or something. But then on a spiritual level, there are actually these deep soul contracts where you see that somehow this person has volunteered, again spiritually, unconsciously usually, to be instrumental in also breaking open some of those fractures so they can reheal, to help you, push you into who you're actually supposed to be. And that's beyond good and evil. That's the point where we are all walking each other home, and where the benevolence of the divine is of a much more ruthless character, we could say, than the quality of what we would simply prefer as tender, fragile human beings who also like to be held and affirmed, and all those things, right? And what I'm driving at here is that hopefully you can find a type of safety, security, perspective in looking at your life through this lens of significance. Because if you begin to see that what you are seeking is always significance, and what your mind is producing and presenting to you are always things that it feels like this is the most significant thing of all the million processes that are going on in your body and outside you and everything, I somehow chose that you would have to begin to think of this book you read when you were 17 or something, because right now there's something here that I can present to you that's significant, that can help you grow yourself. And you will see as you move into this path of significance, this path of meaning, that reality on the outside begins to correspond with it. And that's what we call synchronicity. So these weird, dense layers of meaning where you find that the correspondences that are flowing through you and through other people are somehow related to a great orchestration, a great symphony of meaning that the entire universe is playing, and that you are an interpersonal participant in. And what you do then is that you rejoice in this fact, and you connect to the fact that, well, you are eternal, all this pain is an illusion, you are essentially just channeling in, creating an experience of extreme significance for the divine to behold. And the divine essentially is the self, it is you, it's the eternal part of you, it's a circumference that holds all parts of existence in love, trust, and compassion. So with that, I hope this talk helped you, that there was some clarity in it, meandering as it was and as they always are. And I send you much love wherever you are on your path.